Hey guys, it's Taylor here, coming right back at you with another video about authentication on top of our message board. This video is an hour and a half long. I apologize for being that long. I couldn't find a good place to split it. Watch on 1.5 times speed, that's what I would do. Give me any comments, questions, or concerns you have, and good luck. So let's get right into it. What we've got here is we've added authentication to our message board. So now to be able to look and to write posts, you have to be logged in. So let's get rid of this login path and let's remove it and see it redirects us right back to the login page. So now you're not able to view posts or edit or delete or add posts without being logged in. So what we can do is we can create an account. We can just do anon@person.com. We have a little bit of validation here. So if we do create account, we have to make sure the passwords match. So we can go password. We can do also account is badly formatted. I also have already made an account at taylor@example.com. And this email is already in use by another account. So what we have is we have a little bit of validation involved, which is nice. So we've created our account. We've signed in. We have a big sign out button at the top. We have the ability to still make posts with a title and a body. We can still delete those posts. So when we sign out, it takes us back to the home page, and then we can log right back in. I'll log in with a different account, just as an example. So we can log right back in, which is perfect. We also have validation here, which, you know, if I do thing@whatever.com and just random password, we're going to get could not log in, check email and password. So that's what we're going to add today. We're going to add authentication, and we're going to still be using Firebase, React, Redux. For the routing, we are going to be using React Router. I'm going to go over the installation, what that looks like in a little bit. But that's just a basic overview of what we're going to add to our message board in this video. Before we get started actually looking at code, I'm going to go over how to pull down this project. Since we're starting from another point in another video, I'd like to run over quickly how you can start from where that video stopped and just immediately start this video. So basically this is my GitHub page. If you've never used GitHub before, it's fine. So this first pinned repository, which is React Redux message board, we need to go to this and we need to make sure our branch selected is video 1. So this is where I stopped the first video and I branched it off so that way anyone that wanted to start at this video right here has the ability to. So you're going to be able to go to clone or download. After you copy this git link, what you're going to do is do git clone, paste in the link. Now what you're going to need to do, if you don't know any git, that's fine. Just do git checkout video 1. It might be useful to actually be in the directory for that. So cd into React Redux, then do git checkout video 1. And then what you can do is you can see that that's what we have now. We have now checked out to that branch, and that's all the files that I had in the state that I released video 1. So now you can start this video without ever having looked at any of the other videos, because why would you want to do that? So now that we have that done, I'm going to open up WebStorm. You can use any text editor you'd like. I'm a big fan of WebStorm and JetBrains in general. So again, you can use whatever you'd like. So now we've got that out of the way. You can see here, this is the state that we left our last video. I'm going to make a run configuration very quickly. If you don't use WebStorm, or if you are going to use WebStorm, a good thing to do, instead of having to use npm run start, you can actually set it up here. If you just click the down arrow, hit the plus button, I like to name mine run, and then it'll be hovered over run. You click start, apply, okay. So now whenever you hit run, you can't quite run yet, because whenever you pull down an npm project or a React project, you always do npm install. This will install the dependencies to make sure that you actually have them, because the node modules doesn't ship, because that would make your files extremely big to pull off. So now that we have that, now we can run it. Ooh, I click it twice. And there it is. You're going to be able to post to your own if you're using your own configs. I keep my configs in there just because it's actually not that big of a deal. But if you're using your own configs, which you probably should be because at some point I'm probably going to change my configs, or they're just going to go out of date, you're going to notice that you cannot post to the message board. And that is because there's a permission denied. So what I did is I went to my Firebase console, go to Firebase, go to console. In my console, I've taken my database and made it authentication only. So in my database, my rule says auth is not equal to null. So if you are not authenticated, you cannot read and you cannot write. So that is why there are no posts here, and that's why you can't add any posts. So if you've got your own configs, you need to go and do that and set that up. It's very easy. You just change the string in here from true to auth is not equal to null, and the same thing for read and write. So now that we've got that, we've got our node modules installed, we've got our app. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to do a little bit of refactoring. I'm going to kind of show the power of components. I didn't really use components much in my last video. I just chunked everything into the App.js folder. But now that we're about to be using React Router, we're going to need to do some slight refactoring so that everything starts to make a little more sense, because now our app isn't just one big component. We're going to have separate components for each page, where the home component is, a page, the login is going to be a page, and the create an account is going to be a page, as opposed to just a big app.js, which can turn into a lot of spaghetti very quickly. So now that we got that, let's go ahead and install React Router. So we're going to do npm install --save React Router DOM. So React Router DOM is the newest version of React Router. React Router kind of did a split where the old version and the new version are drastically different. I believe that's why they named it React Router DOM. I actually don't know, but I just know that I'm using React Router DOM in this video for my project here. So now that we have React Router DOM, so we're going to go into the index.js, and we're going to format the document correctly. I do like semicolons on all of mine. You can do whatever style you'd like. So we're going to import browser router switch and route from React Router DOM. So that we've got that, what we're going to do is we're going to wrap, instead of app, what we're going to do is we're going to start having specific components, as I said before. We're going to have specific components for each page. So we're going to do a browser router object, or browser router tag rather. So we're going to have switch. What switch does is I'm going to add a route to it. I'm going to do path is equal to slash, just slash. That's going to be our home page. And then the component is going to be app. So what this is going to do is we're saying that whenever I reach the path dash, render the component app. So now, if I go back to my page here, we've still rendered it, and it's still rendering just fine. And even if I do slash whatever, it's going to load out the page. Now, if I were to do, if I were to open another route on top of it, like for us, it's going to be login. With a switch, it's going to take the most applicable one first. So you never want your home to be at the top, because your home is most applicable. It is going to blanket everything. So it's going to go, is this applicable? Yes. I'm going to render that component. So if we have login, it's going to render the app component, and then it's just going to stop. But if we have just dash login isn't that, so it's going to go down to a route, this one, with this component. So we haven't created our login component yet. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to start cleaning our directory up a bit, because we're about to start adding a lot more files. So we're going to add a directory of containers, and then we're going to add a directory of components. So the difference between a container and a component is a container connects to your global store, and a component does not. So the reason you have a difference between a container and a component is because you can make very reusable components that don't need to be connected to the overall store. All they do is render things. So just kind of looking at it, this bottom piece could be a component because really it's just a form that calls a function. That's all it does. And then it dispatches that function. So instead of having this just be rendered as JSX from our container, we can just render the component from the container and make the container hooked up to the store and render the component in the component class. We're not quite going to do that. We're going to do a little cleanup here, but it's not going to be too drastic. So first we're going to need to rename this app to, we're going to name it to list posts. So now that we have it named as list posts, actually what we need to also do is you're going to need to change this import statement. WebStorm does this automatically, but not all text editors and IDEs do this, but I am going to change the component name from app to list posts just so it's not confusing. So now we've changed that, we need to make sure it's still loading on the screen. Perfect. So now that we've done that, we're going to move this into the containers folder. Again, you're going to need to make sure that your import statement is still correct. It's very nice. WebStorm does this automatically. Ooh. I missed import. So now that we have our list posts, we're going to open up our list posts. And we're going to render this as its own component so you can kind of get an idea of how it works. So we know that a card post is always going to have a card block. This div and this div are always going to be the same. So realistically, there's no reason that we need to type div class name card post, div class name card block every single time. Not necessarily always going to have a card title, not necessarily going to have card text, and not necessarily always going to have this button. But a little formatting there. But we always know that we're going to have this, so we can kind of render these into their own component. So we're going to do a new JavaScript file in the components folder. We're going to name this card post. Actually, name it postcard. I always like to add my files to Git. I can delete them by myself. So we're going to do this like any other component. We're going to import React from, actually we're going to import React and component from React. Then we're going to do export default class postcard extends component. And then we're going to do render, return. Then we have our div. So I'm just going to copy this out, and then I'm going to paste it in here. Now, obviously, we don't have access to post.title and post.body, but we don't need them. I said that all we're going to have is a card post and a card block. So what we can do, as you can see in a div, a div takes in things within it. What that's called children, and that's going to always be on a component. So if I do this.children, what that's going to allow me to do is I'm going to be able to do post card. Make sure to add your import statement. As you can see, it did it for me. So if I delete these two and these two, we want this to be in the body of our postcard. Key is not defined. We don't need key on that, but we do need a key on postcard. Look at that. So obviously you can't see the post. I'm actually going to turn off my authentication for a second just so we can see them. So we set these back to true, so now we'll be able to see. That's why I advise you doing your own configs. And if you do your own configs, you need to put them in the Firebase.js right here. Just delete these and paste in your own, and you'll be good to go. So now that we've got this, I think we should be able to add a text and add a body. Ooh, there is a problem here. It didn't actually render in. Why did it not? There's a little typo there. I needed this .props.children. This comes in on props. You don't just own children. In React, everything comes in from your props or your state. You don't just have a children object. So as you can see, now that we have this, the delete button still works. Everything still works as it was planned. So now that we've got that out of the way, that's a good, simple little refactor that you could probably see all over this page, where you could very easily, you could even do, a card. You could do this whole post in its own and then send down this on click into the button if every post is going to have a button, or if you want to render another button component. So I could have, my delete post button could be its own component. And then what I could do is I could render these and then send in another component, which would be really cool. There's a plethora of ways to do it. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because, it's a little out of the scope of this video, the best practices of doing React. I don't know the best practices. It's kind of up in the air about what is a best practice. Should this be in a component? Should this be a container? Basically, you should try and abstract out as much as possible to make as reusable components. Because if I soon want to add an edit page, you probably want to be able to delete from the edit page, right? So I could import this button, and that would help have modularity. That button would always be the same. It would always look the same. But as I said, a little out of scope for this video, but this is just one simple refactor that we've got to kind of show you what the difference is and how powerful components are. So now we've got that out of the way, we're going to start creating our login page. So we're going to do new in a new container, JavaScript file. We'll name it login. And we're going to do this like every other component. We're going to do import React components. So what I've got here is I've just got some boilerplate code that's, exports a hello world. So we're going to go back to our index.js. We're going to make a new route with a path of login and a component of login. So make sure to include in your import statement. So now, if we go back to Chrome, if we do /login, you can see hello world here. It's black, but it is here. The text is here. So now we've got routing. Very simple routing. React Router is amazing at what it does. It is very powerful, very simple to use. All we added was browser router, switch, and added our routes. That's all we had to do, and now we have routing. So now we have our login page. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new component to make a simple login box. So as you saw before, we can actually look at the web page here on my Heroku. I'm going to make a new video soon. It's going to be very short about how to deploy to Heroku. It's very simple. If you want to look it up yourself and do it, that's fine as well. What we have is we have this simple card here that has our login stuff in it. And then we have another simple card here that looks pretty much the exact same as our login. So that is a perfect example of wanting to create a component. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this, and then we're going to render it on the page without any of the email password or anything in it, because we're going to reuse it for both our sign up and our login. So what we're going to do, we're going to do right click in our components, new JavaScript file. We'll name this simple box. As always, with every component, import React component React export default class simple box extends component. So we've got a div here. We're going to add a class name of container. What this is going to do is it's going to put it in the middle of the screen right here. That's what container does. It pulls it to the middle. After we've done our container, we're going to start actually writing our component. We're going to do div class name. Now I'm going to use Flexbox here. What Flexbox does is it's basically a way to position things. I use a mixture of Flexbox and the row system. I really enjoy Flexbox. It's how you do React Native as well. So I'm going to briefly explain what this does. Deflex says this is going to be a flex box. It's Bootstrap 4 syntax, basically. It's Bootstrap 4 class names. This says I'm going to be using Flexbox. Justify content center will put all of the content in the center of the screen, so right here. And then also align self center. It aligns it in the center vertically. So we've got ourselves. Basically, we're centering everything as much in the center as we can. Next up, we're going to add a div class name. This is going to be a card and a call small 6. Again, it's not going to be perfect styling of any kind, but it's going to get us a decent looking for what we want right now. So we're going to do a div class name of card block of last name. Oop, forgot a div. So what we're going to do now, we can render one of two things. As you saw before, we could do this dot children and just render all the children. I'm going to kind of do it a different way here just to show you the different ways that you could theoretically do it. So we're going to div class name. This is going to be the title. And then we're going to center it. And I'm going to use the props to output the title. So I'm going to send in from its parent in props the title. And I'm going to do the same thing with body. And then I'm going to do the same thing with footer. What this will allow us to do is whenever we call this component, so let's say we call the component, we're going to say simple box. I'm going to be able to say title is equal to title. And then our body is going to equal to like a function of this dot render body. And then the footer will be the same thing. So what that allows us to do is if our JSX start getting a little complicated, what we can do is we can render it somewhere else so it's not all in our one spot. So we're kind of rendering it in different places. This isn't a great way to do it, isn't a horrible way to do it, but it is a way to kind of think about how you would modularize components. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to our login.js, and then we are going to do a postcard, and our title is going to be sign in. So we should see that didn't work very well, did it? Let's go debug it and see what our problem is. So we have a postcard. We have our title of sign in. We don't want to render a postcard. We want a simple box. Postcard is what we made before. A simple box is what we have now. Ahaha, there it is. As you can see, we kind of have this dark shaded box. This dark shaded box is the footer of the card. Now, we don't always want that to show up, so we're going to kind of do a conditional rendering. So we're going to say, the way you do conditional rendering in React is a little weird, but it kind of makes sense. So we're going to keep it that way. So we're going to do this dot props dot footer and this div. So let's see if this works the way I expected it to. It did. So what this says, it says if footer exists, render this piece. Now you can see that the box went away. This can be pretty powerful, but it's also kind of a weird syntax. I'm not a huge fan of it, but it does get what we want done, and it does it the exact way we want it to do it. We're going to clean this up even a little more. We're going to say const title body footer is equal to this dot props. That way, ooh, I need to put that in the actual render method. So what this does is it pulls title, body, and footer off of this dot props. So now what I can do is I can just render the title, body, and footer. And if you don't know what I just did, I just used a simple vim command of, find and replace to delete all those. So that's a pretty simple, this is a pretty simple component, and it's rendering on the screen pretty well now. So now that we've got that, we need our actual sign-in boxes. We need email and password to show up, and then we need our two buttons of sign in and create account, and the create account will push onto the history for us to then be able to redirect to the create account screen. What we can do now is we can move to create these fields, but as you could see, these fields are the same across the both. So again, these are a perfect avenue to create these fields as kind of components. So we're going to create a field as a component. We're just going to render it 3 different times with basically 3 different arguments. So we're going to make a component called input field. As normal, we're going to import React. This time we're not going to import component. I'm going to show you a different kind of component. So we're going to do const input field is equal to props. So with a functional component, you don't automatically get props. So whenever you do extends class or extends component, props come in automatically. With this, you have to pass in props as a fat arrow function. So we're going to return a div. The top div is going to have a class name is equal to form group hyphen, sorry. And it's going to have a row in it. We're going to have a label HTML4. So this is going to be, if you click on the label, it is going to highlight the box with that ID. So we're going to be sending in an ID in our props. If I could type. We're going to have a class name is call sm2 and then column form label. And we're going to do props dot label. And then when we're done with that, then we're going to do slash label to end the tag. And then we're going to need a div class name, small column of 10. We're going to have an input, and our on change, we're going to do whatever our props tell us to do. It's going to be a type of props.type. And then it's going to have an ID of props. .id. Let's have a class form control and a placeholder. We're going to use backtick notation here. String interpolation, please enter now. So in the English language, obviously you use a or and depending on if it starts with a vowel or not. We don't want ours to just say, please enter a something that starts with a vowel. That would just be kind of weird. So we're going to have a little function up here. Function is vowel. We're going to send in a character. And we're going to do a little regex here. We're going to do /. This is beginning of word. AEIOU. And then we're going to go outside that. $dot test. To lowercase. So what I've said is beginning of word, end of word. I'm really only sending in a character, but basically if the character I send in is A, E, I, or U, return true, else return false. We're testing the character for lowercase because you obviously don't want to only test the uppercase. But now we're going to do please enter, and now we're going to do $, open close curly braces to get into JavaScript, is vowel, props dot label sub-0. Question mark and otherwise a. So what we said is please enter if it is a vowel, return an, else return a, and then we'll do props.label. So with that, we've got our input field. So we can now go back to our login. And now with simple box, remember that we did body, title, and footer. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to have a render body. And we're going to return 2 input fields. So we're going to have input field. We have 2 of them. Now for input field, what do we have? We need a label, an ID, an action, a type, and that's it. So we're going to need an ID. So this first one, we're going to have the ID is equal to email, type is equal to text. What else do we need? Label. We have a label, email. We're going to have an input action. So for our inputs on this, I think it'll be better to use the React state. Why do I think it'll be better to use React state? Because when logging in, it doesn't matter. The rest of the application does not care about when you log in or about what the username and the password is. I'm going to have access to that object later. So I am not going to need the ability to access what I typed in as my email and what I typed in as my password. That's useless for the rest of the application. So if the rest of the application doesn't care, why would I store it in the global state? Why not just store it in the React state? And if I'm restoring it in the React state, I'm going to need the constructor. And then we're going to do super state. Oh, actually, well, it doesn't really matter, but it should be props, not state. And then we're going to do this dot state is equal to user, or actually email and password. So we have our email, we have our password. So for our function of input action, we are going to do input action is equal to a fat arrow function, and it is going to be this dot set state. So we actually are going to need an argument here. So it's going to be event. So we're going to set the state. For this is going to be the email. So we're going to set email equal to event.target.value. So what you can see here is we're setting, whenever we type in, our input action is going to be changing the email to the actual email that you're typing in. So we're keeping track of it not in the Redux state, but in the React state. I understand this can be kind of confusing, and it's kind of a gut check of, does my application really need access to this object, or do I just need access to this object here? So instead of, I don't need to store the password forever in the Redux store because I'm never going to need it again until they auth again. And they're always going to be authing on the login page. At no point are they ever going to auth on a different page. So it makes sense just to keep this in the Redux store or the React state as opposed to the Redux store. So now we've got our ID, type, label, and input action. That should be all we need. So we also need this for password. So we have an ID of password, type of password, a label of password, an input action, of this dot set state. It's going to be the same concept. It's going to be password is equal to event.target.value. Ooh, do I have a, I have a bit of a typo here. There we go. Gotta love the reformatting on WebStorm. So now we should be able to insert an email and a password. So we're going to render the body. So our So our body is going to be equal to this dot render body. And now let's kind of see what it looks like. See if we're getting any errors. We have please enter an email, please enter a password. Make sure we have no console errors while typing. And to watch, what we can actually do, we can actually console, not here, we'll do it in the actual render method. Console.log this.state. And what that'll do is whenever I'm typing, as you can see, it's bumping up the email and again, bumping up the password. So you can see that we've now hooked it up correctly. And now you've kind of gotten a flavor for what the React state is. If you've never seen the React state before, this is how it works. You only attribute the state in the constructor, and then every time they're forward, you use this dot set state. So we've set the state email to its new value whenever we type something in. So that way we always have access. And we don't need to do it on blur because we did it on blur. It could be a bigger issue if you did it on blur. It's just easiest to do it on the input action. And also it's not heavy. It's not like you're losing a ton of performance messing around with the states. React is very performant in this aspect. So now that we have that, we actually need our buttons. So again, if we go back and we see our create account button and our go back button, we have our sign in button and our create account. These are the same two buttons. So again, we can make another component to render these buttons. So let's go into WebStorm and then we're going to create something called a form footer button. We're going to do footer form button. For this one, we're going to do import. This is also going to be a simple arrow, a simple functional component as opposed to a full-blown component, because realistically it's just going to be two buttons. You don't need too much on it. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull the stuff that I know I'm going to need off. So I'm going to need a submit later, an other label, and a go to link. So what these are going to be for is our submit label is going to be the name of the submit button. Our other label is going to be the name of the other button label. And our go to link is going to be what our go back button does. So for here, we have sign in, create account, and create account pushes to the create account link. And then we have create account and go back. And our go back button pushes us back to the login screen. So now what we need to do is we need to return a div, class name. Again, we're going to have d flex, which says we're in Flexbox, justify content between. Now, what justify content between is going to do, so let's say we had, 1, 1. We want 1 and 1 to be as far apart in the row thing that we have. We want it to be, we want it to look like this. That's what justify content between does. So if we had a third thing, it would put it around right here. If we had 5 things, it would do something like this. It tries to equally space out all the elements it can in the width that it has. So as you'll be able to see here, I'm justifying the content between these two buttons. So we're going to have a button, and the first one is going to be of type submit. The class name is going to be button primary. This is just for the colors. And now we're going to do submit label. It doesn't need to actually say submit label. We want to pull down the submit label. Since this is going to be inside of a form, what we're going to have here is that we're actually going to put a form in our login.js around these input fields. So we're not going to need this to actually do any on clicks or anything, because we're going to actually just deal with the on submit of the form as opposed to the on click of the button. So we're going to have our second button. Sorry about that. We're going to have our second button is going to be of type is equal to button. Class name is going to be button and button info. Again, it's just the colors. And this is going to be our other label. So now we have our other label. This is actually going to need an on click. So we're going to do on click, not on change. On click is going to be a fat arrow function. And then we're going to do, so for now, we're not going to worry about this as much. We're just going to console.log hit button. Because we are going to need to send our props down from our other button. But for now, we should, we haven't actually rendered it on the screen quite yet. Let's go back to WebStorm. Let's go back to login.js. And then now let's do footer form button. And then we need a submit label and an other label. And we're also going to need the, submit label, other label, and go to link. So we're going to do submit label is going to be login. Our other label is going to be create account. And then our go to link is going to be /create account. For now, that's not going to work, and that's fine. So hopefully we don't get any errors. We did. We haven't imported it yet. I see why we have our error. We haven't exported footer button. That's our problem. So that's why we're still getting an issue. Yes, we are. Maybe I have a typo in here. There it is. Now look at that. That looks the exact same as this. Oop, looks the exact same thing, except this is zoomed in a little bit. if we wanted to make them sure that they are the exact same. This one says sign in, that one says log in. So we'll go ahead and make a match. We'll say sign in. So as I was saying before, we need to send in this.props. Now we don't need we don't need to send it in like that. We need to send it like this. Why? Because this has access to our history. So what history is, it's on React Router, and it says that I'm going to be able to push states and replace states based on where you are. So I'm going to be able to handle the routing as opposed to just, it has full access to the routing that you have. So you can go back one, you can go forward one. Basically, it has your entire history available to it to do with what you want. So instead of console.logging hit button, we're actually going to go up here, and then instead of go to link, we're going to also add history. So we're going to do history dot push go to link. Now for us, this might not do anything, which will be fine. So if we push create account, it pushes to create account, but we don't have a thing for create account. So the first thing it found that matched was slash, because it is slash create account. So the first thing it's going to find is just slash. So let's create a new container. We'll do create account. It's going to be a normal component. Ooh. So now that we've got that written, we can actually go back to our index, make another route. We're going to do create account, and we are going to do the component of create account. Don't forget your imports. So we have our hello here. So now we need to go back to our login page. And we're going to hit create account, and it's going to take us to the create account with our hello text. What we've got now is we just need to render the same box but kind of different stuff in it. So we're actually going to go to our other one. We're going to actually copy this entire render body. And this, I'm doing this as a kind of a time saver, but this could actually be pushed into a different kind of component where you could theoretically make this a component in itself, and then you're just rendering a single component as opposed to having to return the body. But in essence of time, this is already going to be a relatively long video. I think why not just keep it not the best in the world, but pretty decent. So instead of rendering divs, we're going to render our simple box, and our body is going to equal this.render body, and the title is going to be create account. So if we go back here, we refresh, we create account. It is the exact same thing, but it has create account on it. So we need to actually add a second input field. We're going to actually make these match up. And this is going to be confirm password. So we type password. The label is going to be confirm password. And then we're going to need a state of confirm password. So we have email, password, confirm password. What else we're going to need? We're going to need to do our constructor with props, super with props. this dot state is equal to email password confirm password. So now that we've got that all set up, it should be very similar, if not the exact same, as our other create account. Aha, we don't want to create an account from our create account. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to change this to go back. And we're going to change this to create account. And our go-to link is just going to be login. So we're going to log in, we're going to do go back. So if we hit go back, it's going to go back to login. We hit create account. It's going to go create account. We can't create an account yet because we actually haven't looked up that logic. But we basically built a good UI for our login and our create account. So we've built a good UI around creating an account and logging in. Next up, we're about to start actually doing the logic of creating the account and logging in. And then we're going to deal with the fact of we don't want people to be able to go straight to our home page. We want to redirect them to the login page. But the way that Redux works and the way that Firebase works, that is going to be a little confusing because it is actually an asynchronous task that waits and watches for the user. So I'm going to kind of do it in a little weird way, and we're going to expand upon that idea in the future to kind of have a loading bar, or not necessarily a bar, but kind of a loading state where any asynchronous action we're doing, we're waiting for the loading to happen. But that's where we're going. So we're going to need to make more actions and another reducer. So first we're going to start with the reducer. We're going to create a new reducer we're going to call it the user reducer. And as with any reducer, you're going to do export default, export default function, state is equal to that, and then action. Then you're going to switch on action.type. And then our default is just going to be return state. So now that we've got our reducer, we're going to need to hook that reducer up in index.js. Where instead of post, we're going to do user is going to be from user reducer. Going to import that. So now we have our reducer all set up. So now we're going to need actions, new JavaScript file, user action. Is it action or actions? I don't remember what I made it. So I'm actually going to rename that to actions because we are going to have more than one action in here. Refactor, rename. I'm going to do user actions. So for now, we're going to do sign in first, and then we're going to do create second. So because you can create account on Firebase and then look up or type in those credentials and it should work. So we're going to do export function. So our first function is going to be to get the user. So this is going to be another function very similar to our onChange. So we're going to do return dispatch auth. So we don't have auth. We're going to want to return dispatch. So we need access to our auth service. So we're going to go to our Firebase. We're going to do export const auth is equal to firebase.auth. And then we can go back to our user actions. We're going to dispatch a function that says auth.on state change. So we're going to actually need to import auth. We're going to need to import auth from Firebase on state change, and we're going to have user, and then we're going to need to dispatch a type of get user, I'm going to send our payload. Ooh. And our payload is going to be user. Ooh. Oh, single quote, double quote. So, as always, I really don't like to do just simple strings. So we're going to do export get user is equal to get user. And then we're going to change this to get underscore user. So what this is doing, it's very similar to the on posts, where whenever you load up the screen, it's going to run this function and say on auth state changed, I'm going to dispatch a type of get user payload user. So for us, user is going to be null when no one's signed in, and user is going to have all the stuff on a user object whenever it's not, or whenever you are signed in. So the way you're going to be able to tell if you are signed in or you aren't signed in is you can look in your Redux store and say, do I have a user? Yes, I'm signed in. Is my user null? No, I'm not signed in. So I need to redirect backwards to the login screen. So we need to actually go reduce this. So we need to close any tabs that we don't need. And then we'll go to Firebase. And then we'll go to user reducer. And then we're going to do case. Don't forget we need to import get user from our user actions. And we're going to do get underscore user. And we're going to return dot state and action dot payload. Or actually, user is equal to action dot payload. So that way, we'll always have access to our user object. We seem to have a bit of an error on our user actions. It's because I forgot to export const get user as opposed to just export. I apologize. There we go. Now we have all of our stuff coming in correctly. So now that we have our get user, we should be able to access user on any of our stores or any of our containers. This hasn't been connected, but our list post, we should be able to have access. So if we do user, what we're going to do state.user. So what that does is now we have access to the user. So if user is null, we're going to need to go back to our login page. The problem with that is this is an asynchronous action. So get user is asynchronous, so it doesn't immediately run on the page. It doesn't check before we try and load the page. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to kind of, it's not hacky, but it's an interesting way to solve it. So we're going to do a loading state. So is equal to true. Oh, sorry, not loading. There we go. We're going to have a key of loading and it's going to be true. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to our list posts. We're going to go here and we are going to have something else called own props. So what this is going to do, whenever I include own props is going to take whatever reducer initial state I had and use it. So whenever it comes in, we are going to have in our list post method, it's going to say it's loading, and I'm going to show you this. So I'm going to say when component will mount, we'll do this dot props dot get user, and then we're going to import get user from actions, user actions, and then we're going to use this. So now we have that. What we're going to do is we're going to, on our there's a function built into React called component will receive props. I need to learn how to spell receive. So we got component will receive props, and then we're going to do next props, and then we're going to console.log next props. So we're going to go to our built-in page. Ooh, we seem to have an issue. A.onStateChange is not a function. It's not onStateChange, it is on auth state changed. So we are going to go to our user action. It is not on state change, it is on auth state changed. Now let's try and load that up. There it is. So we initially received our props. We have quite a few props on here, but we're mainly looking for user. So we have loading true, user null, and then it comes back again and it says loading true, user null. So as you can see, it called it twice. So what we're going to actually do is get user. We're going to do ... state users action.payload. So what we're going to do is, instead of sending in our old state and our user is our action.payload, what we can actually do is this. We're going to delete in this. We're going to do loading is false, and then we're going to do ... action.payload. So that way, ooh, I missed a dot there. So now what that will do is, if we go to user now, our loading is false, and we don't have a user in here at all. User.loading is false. We don't have a user. Since we don't have a user, what we're going to want to do is we're going to redirect back to our other page. So we're going to go back to list posts. We're going to say if this.props.user.loading is true and this.props.user.email is undefined, because email is a property on user, what we're going to do then is we're going to say this.history.replace, this.props, I apologize, slash login. So what I'm saying here is I'm saying if loading is false, if I'm saying I am not loading and the email is still undefined, we've tried to log in and there is no user. Now, we can also need to put this here. Now, the reason we need to put this here and it's not just going to be this.props, it's going to be next props. The reason we do this is there's actually a way that you can get here without entering one of these, and you need to do both of them to make completely sure that your props isn't loading and next.props.user is undefined. I had an issue with this. There may be a better way to do it than this, because I did just literally copy and paste code, but this is the way I found to do it, and for now that this will work the way we expect it to. So now if we go to our slash page, it automatically redirects us to login. So if we try to go back to there, so now that we have completely redirected ourselves, we can deal with the fact that what we want to do is now we want to be able to auth ourselves. So we're going to go back into our user actions. We're going to export function login. Ooh. We're going to have username, password. And then we are going to return dispatch. So for this, again, just like posts, our listener is here. So we don't actually need to dispatch an action here. We're just going to get Redux Thunk to run this whenever we call .login. So we're going to do dispatch. We're going to do auth.sign in with email and password with a username. Oh, not username. We're going to do email because we're not doing a user, we're just doing an email. So we're going to do email, password. So if we do login, go back to our login. So now we're going to need to make this into a form. We're going to need to have an on submit, and we're going to do this.submit login. This is going to be an arrow function, and we're going to need the event. And the reason we're going to need the event is so that we can stop the propagation of the event. And we need to do /form. And we need to come up here and make this submit login event. Do event.prevent default. And then we're going to need to import login from actions/user actions. And then we're going to need to do export default. And we can't have two exports, so delete till C. Export default connect null. This will usually be our map state to props, but we don't need that. This is going to be the function of login. And then we're going to do login. So in our submit login, what we're going to do is we're going to do this.props.login with this.state.user or email and this.state.password. And that, so what we should then do, we need to catch an error. And right now we're just going to console.log that error. So what we want to do after that is we want to check and make sure that what we've got, now we want to make sure that whenever we reach this page, we are not letting you log in when you're already logged in. So we need to do component will mount. And then we're going to do this.state or this.props dot get user. We don't have get user yet, so we're going to go from login get user, and then again we're going to need to go into the component will receive props next props, and then basically we're going to say if next props dot user dot email equal to undefined or not equal to undefined, then what we want to do is we want to this dot history dot push our home page. So we need to actually import connect. I'm sorry, I just noticed that we hadn't imported connect. Woo. So to get the user, we're actually going to need a function map state to props state. Can't type today. So we've got our map state to props. We're going to return user is state.user. And then we're going to do map state to props. So now I do believe that we should be able to log in. We might run into an issue. So let's just do a bunch of garbage and hit sign in. We got our error code, so that's good. So I got Taylor. So actually, I'm going to show you how to create a new account so that you can do it yourself. So I'm actually going to teach you how to create user at user.com. Password. And we have an error, push of undefined. So that would mean this dot props dot history. And look at that. just like that, we have now authenticated, and we should be able to post. And there it is. I do believe that I left my database auth off. So we're going to do read as auth not equal to null. Auth is not equal to null. So we're going to publish that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go back here, open up our message board, refresh, and look at that. So now we're going to need a log out button because we're going to want to be able to log out. And as you saw in this, well, let me log back in. As you saw in this, I'm just going to make it a big button at the top so it's very easy just to get started. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into our list posts. On our render, we're going to do div class name is equal to navbar button. Ooh. Class name is equal to button danger. Call it logout or sign out, I guess is fine. And then the on click is going to be, so we are going to go to our user actions, and then we're going to do export function log out, return dispatch, auth dot sign out. So now we're going to do this dot props dot log out. And our props here. Oh, I've missed a div. And then we're going to need an overarching div. And with that, we can now import our log out. And then we'll go to log out. And with that, we should be able to go back here. We have our sign out button. And just like that, it immediately pushes us right back to our login page. And we're signed in. So what was it? User at user.com password signs us in, and now we can sign out. So we've got authentication working. So now what we need to do is we need to work on creating an account. Creating an account is very similar to authentication, and it's not very difficult at all. So we're going to need to go to our create account.js, and we're going to need to go to our user actions. So we're going to need to export another function, sign up with email. So we're just going to need an email and a password. Return dispatch auth dot sign up or create user with email and password. And then email password. Ooh, that's not how you spell password. Yeah. There we go. So we are going to need to go to the create account.js. We're going to import create, what did I name it? Sign up with email. We're actually going to call it create account. We're going to go back here. We're going to do create account from actions, user actions. So what I just did is I created a function that says return a dispatch, and then whenever I call this function, it's going to say auth.create user with email and password. We're going to do the authentication or the making sure that the password's in the same or stuff on the front end. You shouldn't always do that, but I think it gets across the point here. You should probably check also somewhere else to make sure, but this is an all front-end application. Firebase is just going to make sure that we have a good password and we have a good email for us so that necessarily we don't have to do it. But it would probably be smart to, other than just on the front end, check and make sure things are right. But so we're going to make this into a form as well. So on our form, we do on submit this dot submit account. So we're going to do this. We're going to do this dot submit account. It's going to need to be in a function. So we're going to do event this dot submit account event. Again, we're doing this. So our submit account event. So what we've done here is we're going to make an on submit of the form. We're going to say whenever you submit the form, we want the event, and the event.prevent default. This will prevent the page again from refreshing. So then we're going to want to do this dot props, but we haven't set up our connect yet. So we're actually going to need to import connect from React Redux. Hopefully you're getting the hang of this by now. And instead of export default class, we're going to do export default connect null, but that's our map state to props. So we don't necessarily need that in create account. And then we're going to do create account. We're going to bind it to our component. So now we have access to this dot props dot create account. And then we're going to do this dot state dot password. Oh, not password, email. This dot state dot password. And then we're going to catch any errors. Ooh. There we go. So now that we've caught any errors, we should, in theory, be able to create an account. So we're going to refresh this page just in case. We're going to do, I don't know, what's an email? Example at user.com. Password will be password, create account. So now we're going to go to our message board and see if example at user.com is going to be there. So we're going to need to go to our authentication tab. And what was it? Example at user.com. There it is right here. So we've created our user. So now we should be able to go back. And we're signed in already. Whenever you create an account, it automatically signs you in. So we need to take care of that. And then we're going to say, so if we don't get an error, we'll do a dot then. We'll do a fat arrow function. This dot props dot history dot push. So there's a difference between push and replace. If I were to do replace, that's not going to let me hit the back button to create an account. So I do believe that replace is a good spot for this because you don't want them to have to go back to the create account page. They've logged in. They've successfully created an account. So we're going to sign out. We're going to do another create an account. We're just going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to make sure. As you can see, our .then statement is actually sending us after all that's done. So we're actually not going to put that in a .then. What we're going to do, as you can see, we have our then function before our catch function. We're going to want that then function here as opposed to. So we want to catch the error as a whole in, with the then statement included. We don't want to catch the error, then do something, if that makes sense, hopefully. So now we're going to just do a bunch of garbage, create account. We're going to inspect, go to course. We're going to go to console, and the error you provided does not contain a stack trace, but that's okay. So now that we're catching our errors, we're probably going to want to pop up a little box that says, hey, you've entered your password incorrectly. Hey, there's a user with this email already, or, hey, you need to enter fields. So what we have now is we have a fully functioning authentication system. We have the ability to create a user. We have the ability to sign in with a user, and we cannot read or write to our database without the ability without being logged in already. So this is a full-fledged authentication system. From here on out in the video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on some authentication from here on out in the video, I'm going to be working on some validation for some of these to make sure that you're not submitting things blank. You shouldn't be able to have a different confirmed password and password. From here on out, that's what we're going to do. So if you don't care too much about that, don't worry. You can go ahead and leave now. Make me real sad, but it's okay. So we're going to start with our login.js. So we're going to add on our state an error, and it's going to be blank. So what we're going to do now is with our catch, we are going to this dot set state error is going to be error. So now what we're going to do is we're going to push into our state an error. And then after that, we are going to make a new component, because we're going to use the same little box between both of them to say, hey, here's your error. And then we're going to output the error they have. Now, on submit login, you should never tell them if their username or password is incorrect. You should usually say, hey, your username or your password is incorrect. You shouldn't say your username is incorrect or your password is incorrect, because that allows brute force to be able to say, oh, here's a list of emails. I need to know which ones are valid for this site. I don't want to let someone know that. I want to say something's wrong, check it out. Because whenever you're brute forcing, I'm just going to chunk a whole bunch of emails and see what sticks, as opposed to if you do it this way, just say, hey, both of them are wrong, or one of either is wrong. It'll say, wow, I don't know which one is wrong. So I'm just going to keep guessing. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new component. I'm going to call it error alert. This is going to be another just functional component. We're going to import React from React. Error alert. It's equal to, we're going to need props on this. Ooh, forgot my arrow. I put a space in my arrow. And then we're going to do return div class name is equal to alert danger. These are just bootstrap things. There's nothing really fancy about them. Ooh. Oh. With this bootstrap, it's just a simple alert. There's nothing super big about it. Then we're going to do /div, and then we're going to do this .props.children. So that way we can use that syntax of like a div here. We're going to put the text that we want inside of this alert. So now we're going to go back to login.js, and we are going to do another conditional rendering statement. So we're going to say error, or this .state.error, and error alert. And then we're going to do your username / password is incorrect. And that should do it. So now we should be able to go to Google Chrome. Oh, error alert is not defined. I didn't export it again. So we're going to need to export default error alert. Ooh, not HTML tab row element. So now we've exported that. We go back to login. Ooh. We'll go to error alert. We'll import it, and then now it should work. So if we do this and this. Ooh. Uh-oh. Property of children. Oh, it's not this .props, because it is an arrow function, or because it's a functional component. It's just props.children. Your username or password is incorrect. I don't like it under that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our login. Then we're going to put it above our footer form buttons. ASDF, you use name or passwords incorrect. Look at that. Very simple. And then whenever we log in, make sure we haven't broken anything, and we can still log in. So that's some good validation with that. Let's make sure that if we just refresh the page to get rid of the error, then we just hit sign in, use name or password is incorrect. We might want to highlight the fields as red, as you can see in this one. If I just do sign in, it highlights the fields red. We can do something very similar to what we were doing before. So we haven't talked about this yet, but what you can actually do you can actually do styles on page. So we're going to do var error style is equal to, or not var, const. Should never use var in ES6. So what we're going to do now, we're going to do border color. It's just going to be red. So with our error style, we're going to say style is equal to error style. Well, we only want to show it if there's an error. So we're going to do this dot state dot error. Is there an error? Well, then we'll do error style. Else we'll just do null. And then we're going to want this same here. So with that, we should be able to go back, go to our message board. Ooh, it didn't catch. I put it on the footer form button. That's not where it goes. The reason that our style is not showing up is because we actually haven't put a style in input field. So on our input field, we're going to want to go down here, and then we're going to do style is equal to this, or actually just props.style. That should make our stuff show up. Ooh, did not want to open the Realm browser. There it is. We have our nice, pretty red outlines. So we're going to do the same with create account. We're going to want this to be, this can't be empty, this can't be empty, this can't be empty. And we're going to want to make sure that our password and our confirmed password are the same. So we're going to open up create account.js. So we're going to have a function called validate. So with this validate function, what are we wanting to check? We're going to want to check that. So we're going to get const email password confirm password is equal to this dot props. So if email is equal to empty string, or password is equal to empty string, or confirm password is equal to empty string, return false. And actually we're going to rename this to is valid. Why? Because it returns a boolean. It makes sense. You're asking a question. Hey, is this valid? Return true or false, you know. So our base is going to be return true. And then we're going to do if password is not equal to confirm password, return false. So right now, that's all I can think of. I would rather have it if password is not equal to confirm password. So for now, we need an error on our state. So error. And then we're going to want to do this dot set state error. Please enter in all fields. And then here it's going to be this dot set state error. Please make sure your passwords match. Perfect. So we're going to need to make above here again, we're going to need to make a error alert. And then we're going to do this.state.error. So we don't want it to only show up, so we want to say this.state.error. Ooh, I forgot my curly brace. This.state.error. And so what this is saying again is we're saying if there's an error, render the error alert. So we're going to do create an account. Ooh, it did not work correctly. Oh, I know why, because we have not validated whenever we hit the button. So on submit account, we don't want to try and create the account if not is valid. So if not is valid, return this dot is valid. So now let's give it another shot. Create an account. Still didn't work. After much deliberation by myself, I have figured out that it's not this.props, it's this.state. We are not working with props here. We want to be working with state. So now we have please enter in all fields. We're not getting that nasty error. So again, our error is going to be a little different here because Firebase has some built-in things that it wants you to do. So instead of console.logging the error, we're going to do this.setState error is going to be equal to error.message. So now if I do like ASDF 123456 123456, we have an error again. This catch statement should actually be outside of this. So this is our then dot catch error this dot set state error dot message. That email address is badly formatted. So that was our issue. Whenever you put a catch statement, it should be on the outside of your then statement. It should not be then.catch. I don't know how that happened, but I do apologize. So, as you can see now, we have our, well, we did. The email address is badly formatted. And then Firebase has a 6-limit password necessity. So again, we want to highlight the fields when necessary. So we're going to do the same concept here on render body. We're going to say var style is equal to border radius or border color, not collapse, is going to be red. And don't use var. And then after that, we're going to go down to our input field. So style is equal to this.state.error. Error style. Ooh. Or null. Let me do the same thing with this one. Actually, we can just copy this. And then we're going to want to do it to this one as well. And we're going to refresh that. Oh, I seem to have something extra. We have the nice, good color change. So with that, we have a fully functioning account creation system. We have a fully functioning logging in and authentication system. And we have a validation system for if you get, if I do example.com, password, your username or password is incorrect. And then I have a more authentication or more validation if your email is wrong or already been used or you have a bad password, your passwords don't match. So this is very powerful and it allows us to have authentication on our database and really have a good setup for a message board. So that's going to be the end of this video. In the future video, I'm going to add comments and the possibility of pictures to our posts. So we're going to have we're going to have, you're going to be able to leave a comment, and it's going to show comments like in the card. And then you're going to be able to add a picture, and there's going to be a picture on top of the card. And you're just going to, I think that'll be a good wrap-up stage for this message board. I do want to thank you for watching, and if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, feel free to leave them in a comment. And I'll see you guys on the next video.